Thank you, Acting Speaker. And I rise to support the Justice legislation further amendment miscellaneous bill of 2025 as well. This is a bill, of course, that amends various justice and community safety related acts to improve the operation of the courts and justice system overall. And the bill will go to quite a number of reforms through a number of acts, including the Coroners Act of 2008, Birth, Deaths and Marriages Registration Act 96, amend fines and tolling legislation, the Public Advocacy, Guardianship and Administration Act of 2019. But there's 5 acts in particular, with the time I have, that I'd like to focus my contribution on. One is around the anti-vilification social cohesion reforms. Second is around the contempt of court reforms. Third is around animal welfare and bestiality reforms. Fourth is around the County Court Drug and Alcohol Treatment Court. And fifth is the Road Safety Act reforms. Acting Speaker, as the member for Pascoe, Vale, Coburg and Brunswick West, but of course as someone who's a proud son of migrant parents, I remain firmly committed to doing all I can to help build a more socially cohesive, resilient and tolerant community. That's why I've always continued to support measures in this place to combat hate, violence, intimidation and racism through those anti-vilification reforms we previously passed, banning the Nazi salute and Nazi symbol, supporting our First Nations communities through voice, treaty and truth process, standing up for our multicultural communities to combat anti-Semitism but also Islamophobia and other forms of hate, and to stand against hate to support our LGBTIQ+ communities as well. But of course, the devastating terrorist and anti-Semitic attack of 14th December 2025 against our Australian Jewish community on Bondi Beach means we must continue to do more to combat hate and anti-Semitism at its core. I particularly acknowledge everyone who made a contribution yesterday through the condolence motion, particularly my friend, the member for Box Hill, and also my colleague, the member for Caulfield as well. My heart and that of my community remains broken for the victims, their families and the entire Jewish Australian community who were celebrating the first night of Chanukah with their children and loved ones, a sacred time of honouring light over darkness. Our prayers, thoughts also remain with the first responders, emergency services, witnesses and brave everyday Australians who experienced the horror of the attack and did what they could through many heroic acts that have since emerged and been brought to light to keep people safe. Every community in Australia, including the Jewish community, has the right to celebrate their traditions openly and safely without fear, prejudice, persecution or violence. Hatred and extremism have no place in a multicultural and diverse Australia and can never be justified towards innocent civilians, no matter their faith, culture or background. The evil perpetrators of these attacks will not succeed in their efforts to divide and destroy us, and that's why, building on our original anti-vilification laws, we must continue to do more. And this bill proposes to provide that the consent of the Director of Public Prosecutions is not required for a police officer to commence prosecution for an offence on the grounds of incitement of a protected attribute or when threatening physical harm or property damage on the grounds of that protected attribute, that being race, religion and of course sex, sexual orientation, gender, disability, including mental illness, age status and more, and personal association with someone with a protected attribute. Essentially, this reform will lower the threshold for people to be prosecuted for alleged acts of anti-vilification conduct, particularly anti-Semitic conduct, and seek to better stamp out behaviours that seek to vilify and harm people and communities based on these attributes. And Acting Speaker, in this respect, I'd like to draw the House's attention to an email I received on the 22nd of December from a local constituent, which I believe best helps encapsulate the mood and sentiment locally on these issues. And I quote, "I'm writing as a constituent to raise serious concerns about the rise in anti-Semitic behaviour within our state and the impact this is having on public safety and community cohesion. I'm not Jewish, but I feel compelled to speak out. I also recognise what is occurring in Gaza as a genocide and strongly condemn the suffering of Palestinian civilians. Holding this position does not and should not require tolerating hatred or intimidation of Jewish Australians who have suffered immensely in the aftermath of the murder of over 1,200 Israelis by the terrorist group Hamas on the 7th of October 2023, an act of terrorism and brutality that I equally and unequivocally condemn. I'm a 40-year-old mother of 2 young children and I'm increasingly worried about the kind of society we are creating. I want my children to grow up in a community where differences can be debated without fear, where minority groups feel safe in public spaces and where hatred is challenged rather than excused. What they see normalised now will shape Australia they inherit. I fully respect and support the right of people to peacefully protest, including in relation to international conflicts and human rights. However, many rallies have crossed a clear and unacceptable line with openly anti-Semitic language and conduct that vilifies Jews as a group and at times incites hate hostility or violence towards them. When demonstrations move from political expression into racial vilification or intimidation, Jewish Australians, they cease to be legitimate expressions of dissent and become the threat of public safety and social cohesion, and should not be allowed to continue unchecked. I'm particularly concerned about the enforcement of existing laws. Many in the Jewish community feel there has been a lack of accountability for anti-Semitic conduct, including high-profile incidents such as those events at the Sydney Opera House on the 8th of October 2023. The impact is also felt very practical locally as well. Jewish-owned businesses, including one in Marybeck as well, it was previously reported, but others have been harassed, targeted, with some forced to close due to safety concerns, including one the constituent mentions of a bakery in Sydney. When people cannot operate a business or enter public space safely because of their identity, it represents a failure of public order and equal protection under the law. The Bondi attack just a week ago at the time, directed at the Jewish community, has left many of us in shock, devastated and deeply unsettled. While it targeted Jewish Australians, it was also an attack on all Australians, on the shared values that underpin our society. It highlights the urgent need for firm, early intervention against hate-fuelled intimidation and violence. They're also escalating security costs for Jewish schools, synagogues, community organisations and businesses, alongside the cancellation of Hanukkah and other community events due to these safety concerns, resulting in, of course, financial losses. And I urge the government to consider, and she lists a number of measures, including ensuring police consistently enforce anti-vilification, public order and incitement laws at protests and public gatherings, again, amongst other measures. All communities deserve to feel safe in public space, and I ask you to advocate for firm, principled action to address anti-Semitism, uphold the rule of law and protect community safety while respecting human rights. And to that constituent who's a young mother, a doctor as well, I say that is what this bill today and this reform is all about. Number two, the bill also implements recommendations of the Victorian Law Reform Commission's 2020 Contempt of Court report to enable applications to lower courts of the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal, VCAT, to revoke legacy suppression orders. These legacy suppression orders, of course, as we know, heavily impact the right for victim survivors to speak out. And one of those victim survivors I just want to point to is a local constituent who's doing amazing work in this space to combat family violence, is everyone's favourite local neighbour from the show Neighbours. She was an actress on there playing Libby for many years, Kim Valentine. And I was delighted to catch up on many occasions over recent times with Kim to support her advocacy on these important issues, particularly around better health, wellbeing, family violence prevention outcomes for households locally and across the nation. In her role as a lived experience advisor at FAIR, Kim's bringing her powerful voice through lived experience to support national efforts to prevent, deter and mitigate against alcohol-related harm on families, children and communities. And she's advocating for an Australia free from alcohol harm, raising public awareness about the widespread harms caused by alcohol, with alcohol, for example, being involved in at least 65% of all police-reported family violence incidents, Acting Speaker, 65%. She's working to highlight that it's children who face greater harm in households where alcohol is consumed at high risk levels, with men most often being the high risk drinkers. She's advocating for new reforms around retail sales, availability, delivery and access to alcohol through new proposed laws and regulations and corporate accountability. And she's seeking through Fair Australia to partner with government, the retail sector, health and wellbeing professionals and those with lived experience to progress real change in this space. I recently welcomed Kim before the end of last year to Parliament to meet with the Minister for Education, the Minister for Liquor, Gaming and others to help progress that advocacy. The third major reform here, of course, goes to the issues around animal welfare and bestiality. I've had a number of residents contact me on this issue over recent months, including Dale and Lisa and many, many others, who I acknowledge and say to you that this bill directly responds to those issues and concerns. Number four, the County Court Sentencing and Drug and Alcohol Treatment Court part of the bill here is also an important one and talks directly to some of the important work being done by local organisations across the northwest to help support young people with these issues. And I draw the House's attention to the magnificent work of Ahmed Hassan and Youth Activating Youth, the YAY organisation, based out of Marybeck for a long time at the Brunswick Town Hall, servicing the whole northwest. They do incredible work for young people in need, established in 2014 by youth leaders Ali Ahmed and Ahmed Hassan, who was a previous Victorian Young Australian of the Year. YAY has grown to support multicultural diverse communities, people of all backgrounds across Victoria, through dedicated initiatives and programs to reduce youth offending, re-offending, knife crimes and diverting young people away from substance abuse and much more. Over 15,000 people have gone through YAY's programs that have built up young people's confidence, resilience and opportunities to thrive, with over 450 young people also having directly been employed through YAY's partnership and employment pathways. And I attended their recent end-of-year luncheon in Port Melbourne that was attended also by Mark Stone, the Chief Commissioner Mike Bush and many other distinguished luminaries from across Victoria, and many young people, importantly, who've gone through the EA program and reformed their behaviour and gone on to make a good contribution to the community. In this regard, I also acknowledge the work of the Les Twentyman Foundation. I've done a lot of work with Les over the years in fighting for youth outcomes across my community, namely in helping establish the Auction Youth Centre in Coburg, and I acknowledge the current CEO, Paul Burke, for his outstanding work and the work that they do to help support youth outcomes as well.